On today's show, part 2 with myself and Tyler Jones talking all things Hawks offseason. We'll have a full slate of topics on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1528 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday afternoon/evening. And this is, again, part 2 of 3 with my friend Tyler Jones and I talking about all things Atlanta Hawks. I encourage you at the top of the podcast to make it your first listen each and every day. Please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify and YouTube. And again, part 1 should be available in your feed right now with myself and Tyler. Part 2 on the way here, talking about all kinds of things with the Hawks, from the offseason to Dejounte Murray and John Collins and Okongwu and Capela and fit stuff. And then part 3 will be talking more about Pascal Siakam, etc. So please stay tuned for all of that. Without any further delay, here's part 2 with myself and Tyler. I do want to spend some time talking about like what could be happening in the future, but as we kind of wrap up what's going on already with the current roster, Collins is not there anymore. We talked about that a little bit, but I think it's pretty obvious what they're going to do. It's going to be a lot more of Bey and Jalen, and maybe they try Okongwu with the 4 a little bit. I won't rule it out. I know this is something you've been talking about a lot, which is why I'm bringing it up.
I'm saying on Twitter, all I'm saying is Okongwu starting. Whether he's starting next to Capela.
See, you are
he's starting at center. Okongwu, Brad. Okay, we can pretend it's July. I understand this. We can pretend Okongwu is going to be okay with coming off the bench again in his 4th season when he has a contract extension. Right up until training camp happens, and he's like, okay, I'm either starting or trade me. Like that report will come out. I have no sources. You can book this right now. Start me or trade me will happen in 2 months if it's not clear that Okongwu has a starting position.
No, okay, so I don't think you're crazy. I'm not going to go that far because I have to be responsible.
I mean that's fair, bro. I'm just speaking from experience. We saw this with Dennis Schroeder. We literally saw this with Dennis Schroeder and Jeff T. We saw it with them, and we see it all across the league.
And it was also easier. It was also easier, and to go even further to back you up, I think it's the one position where it's a lot harder. Like if you have 2 point guards in the modern NBA. So to use the T shooter example, right? You can theoretically play those guys together some. It's a lot easier to do that. Capela and Okongwu, and it's not that they can't play together. It's not like it's absolutely impossible. But for all of the thought about, there's the whole camp of Okongwu is actually a power forward, which is entirely about him being 6'8".
Well, but hold on, time out. Does Okongwu think he's a power forward?
No.
Or does Okongwu think he's a center?
He thinks he's a center, and so do the Hawks.
Okay.
There's never been a single moment when the Hawks have referred to him as a forward in any context. He's been a center since the day he was drafted. Every release, every roster listing, every conversation with the coaches, he's a center. Anyway, but the thing is, it's hard to play those guys together. And look, I talked about it. You talked about it. I would say this for 3 years, that they have to make a choice at center. And I say that as the guy who is very pro Capela. I think Capela is still really good. I'm high on Clint. But practically, to kind of what you were saying, no agent – take Okongwu out of it for a second. Take him out of it.
Yeah,
no agent wants the former number 6 overall pick, who's proven to be a good NBA player in his first 3 years, wants that guy to come off the bench in year 4. And I am someone who always says starting versus not starting doesn't actually matter. But for players and for agents, it does matter. They do care. And Okongwu's a great guy. Okongwu's been great. Honestly, I want to say that we'll be very clear. Okongwu has been fantastic in not making it an issue, because a lot of guys would have already made it an issue. I saw you brought up Collins the other day on Twitter as professionalism and like the way that Collins handled it all. And Okongwu is a pro by all accounts, and he and Clint get along really well, which probably helps. Like he and Clint are close and cool. But like practically speaking, it is kind of insane to have a guy as good as Okongwu and that he's already proven at his age and have him still be in this kind of middle role in year 4. And again, it's not Clint's fault. Clint's good. It's like you have this good problem, is the way that I put it. Like you have these two guys who are overqualified for the roles you're asking them to play. But it's just
it's hard. Hold on, Brad. It's hard for me to call this a good problem because I look at the center market and I'm like, what can the Hawks even get for Clint Capela?
Yeah.
What team is trading for a center? Like, nope. It's the most. It's both a very important position filled with a lot of good NBA players, and unless you're the elite of the elite,
well, it's also interesting though, and like not to go like crazy on this, but like so Dallas very much wants Clint. That's been out there since the draft. They do want Clint. Houston called, then Houston tried to spend $1 billion on Brook Lopez and couldn't do it. So like there are teams that still want to invest in centers. Like Toronto traded a top 6 protected pick for Jakob Poeltl last of the deadline, which was an insane transaction, and then paid him. So like I generally agree with you. The market is not super robust, but like certain teams still do invest in these guys. The problem I think everybody kind of knows on some level the Hawks need to make a decision. Yeah, it's not a leverage.
The problem is the Hawks are leveraged. The Hawks are leveraged.
And they have been multiple times.
The 29 other teams know that the Hawks have to make a decision. And like they didn't make one with Collins until the people were literally at their door being like, okay, you have to trade him.
Right.
And so now we're doing the same thing with Capela. And like to me, my big thing is that I don't see how you can bring Capela back onto this team if he's not willing to come off the bench. Because if he's not willing to come off the bench, then you're going to have to trade him. Like, and this is not me knocking Capela the player. This is just me being like, Capela, Okongwu is going to be on this roster long term. He's just the better fit long term on this team where the NBA is going, what the Hawks need from the center position. Like I'm watching the entire time I'm watching Summer League. I'm like, how does Capela fit this team?
Well,
like, I'm watching.
Okay.
I'm watching Kamigele like stand in the corner and take corner 3-pointers, and I'm like, and like running DHOs. Every time he catches the ball down to the rim, he's immediately looking to kick it out to a shooter. And like this is how the Hawks want to play. Like this is how Quinn wants to. This is how Quinn wants his bigs to play. Capela, that is not his strength. And like he has strengths, he has real strengths. He's one of the best role men in NBA history. Period. That is true. I believe
rebounders. Yep.
Best rebounder in the NBA. I like. Sometimes I like to look at the numbers. Like be a casual and look at the basketball reference and just look at Capela's rebounding percentage for the entirety of his career. Insane level of production. And like there's real value in having a guy who just cleans up the glass on both ends of the floor. Like that's real positive value. The problem is he's 29 years old. He's going on 30. He's got 2 years left on a good contract, not a great one. But on a good contract, and the Hawks don't really Okongwu is at the point of his career where he's a different player. But if you play Okongwu next to Trae Young for the entirety of his time, he probably gives you either equal value or maybe even slightly less value than what you're getting for Capela on the low end. Like slightly less than what you get for Capela. If Okongwu is allowed to play alongside Trae Young full time, instead of splitting his time between the starters and the bench, which is what he has been doing.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing. You take your first swing at betting MLB at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're a new customer, get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20. You'll win $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. FanDuel has great promotions each and every day. You get paid instantly when you win. The app is also safe and secure. Plus, they have every kind of betting angle that you're looking for that you might possibly ever want at FanDuel. They cover the whole range of sports as well. That includes baseball and the NBA, WNBA, college basketball, college football, NFL, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, and much more. And different wagering options as well present at FanDuel, from live betting to futures, player props, point spreads, totals, money lines, etc. There's no better place to bet all the baseball and basketball action that you're looking for than America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up right now today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get a $200 in bonus bets right now at FanDuel. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
So it goes back to like, okay, you're probably not going to get equal value on the Capela trade, but just like Colin, you probably need to make the trade if you want to build this team long. If you want to look at the bigger picture than this one season.
It's also an asset. This is a very I don't mean it to be this calculated, but it's an asset allocation thing. Like you have too much put in center right now because the counter to what you're saying is like, Capela is objectively too good to come off the bench. And he's also making starter money. Like he's making good starter money, which is what he is. It's a totally fine contract, but it's not a bargain like you just said. So like it's hard sell to be like, okay, Clint, yeah, we're paying you, but we want you to play 20 minutes off the bench. Like now you're paying good starter money for a guy who's come off the bench, which doesn't make sense. So like, and again, I am not trade Capela guy, but like objectively speaking, if you look at the landscape, it makes if and I think this is probably a good assumption, if you want to showcase Okongwu and see what you have there and really invest in him for the first time in terms of like here's a role increase, all that stuff. If you want to do that, you need to trade Clint. Like that's what it comes down to, and that's what I've always said. Like there's a point in the sand where you have to make a decision. I think we've reached that point. It probably would have been better if they did it already. But I think if they want to do what you're saying and invest in Okongwu, which again makes total sense, really good prospect, really young guy, long-term starter at the position, like it makes way more sense to trade Clint than to try to like play him less. You know what I mean? Because eventually, like I know our mutual friend Brett has talked about like he's really low on the Capela extension in the first place, and one of the reasons why you wouldn't have liked that deal is right now. Because if they had not extended Capela, he'd be a free agent right now.
Look at all the fallout of just the Capela extension. You traded Collins for nothing. Why? Because he's playing all his minutes next to Clint Capela, who eats into his value. And other teams are like, who is this guy? He's not the 2010 guy that you signed him. You signed him as a 2010 guy, and then immediately have his role. Like you immediately cut into his role. And we can get more into the role cutting if we talk about the Siakam rumors in a bit with Dejounte, but like you immediately cut into his role with Capela, and also having drafted Okongwu, so Collins gets no minutes at center. And now you're kind of doing the same thing where it's like Okongwu doesn't get to play all his minutes next to Trae Young. So he doesn't get the boon of playing against one of the best offensive players in the NBA. Okongwu has to like manage these lineups of bad defensive players. Like I feel like every year of his career, he's had to be paired next to Gallinari, Bogey, Bay, like the worst defensive players, some of the worst defensive players in the NBA outside of Trae Young. Like he has to be the anchor on these units, and he makes it work somehow. But his numbers don't reflect how good of a defensive player he is to me sometimes. Like but just macro picker. Look how Okongwu's talked about in the league. Okongwu's not on this USA team.
Oh,
you're telling me Okongwu's not better than some of these dudes?
And it's because he's never started, which I think is obviously a little bit short-sighted. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Like I listen to a lot of stuff and talk to a lot of people, and like the diehards, people that like really watch tape and watch games, understand Okongwu's going to be really good. It already is. The people that are, I don't want to say more casual, but like more national, like they're not watching every Hawks game, they don't get it yet because he's only playing 20 minutes a game. And the counting stats are good for a guy coming off the bench. But when Capela's been healthy, Okongwu's never played more than 22 minutes a game. It's just what it is. There's a math problem there. And yeah, to bring it full circle, maybe with Quinn, they think there's an opportunity to try it this year. Maybe Okongwu's shooting has come along more, and they can more trust that. Maybe you can surround them literally with Trae, Dejounte, and Bogey. If you played the two centers with Trae, Dejounte, and Bogey, or Trae, Dejounte, and AJ, like three dynamic perimeter guys, that's the way to try it. If you're ever going to do it, that's how you do it. And I'm not saying they're ever going to. Number one, I've still never heard that they're going to do that, but if maybe they will. To this point, I thought it was crazy to really try it, other than like certain specialized circumstances. But I agree with you 100% in that if you don't trade Clint, the only way to even try to get enough value out of Okongwu is to try them together at some point. And I don't know if that's a plan or not, but there's a couple of different options there. None of them great.
But my bigger point is that Okongwu has to get the opportunity to show out how good he is in this league.
Well, there's extension talks too, because I mean, like they could pay him in October. They could pay him a year early, and that's a tricky negotiation because he's never started. And if you're the Hawks, you can say, "Hey, man, your guy's never been a starter." And Okongwu's side's like, "That's not our fault. Like we know our guy is a starting caliber center." So like, do you pay him and then have another year of this before that? That's interesting because like, if you don't pay him, there's a sinister school of thought if you don't pay him that, hey, we'll still have Clint this year. We'll still keep your value down. When you hit the market next year, then we'll pay you less. Like I that's not the way I'd be thinking about it, but like, I don't know. It's very, very complicated, honestly.
Like even beyond the personal relationships, like to me, as a fan of the Hawks, as a fan of the team, I want to see Okongwu get the opportunity. Period. I want to see him.
He's really good.
31. I got to see his strengths, and I need to see if he can anchor a starting unit next to Trey and Dejounte. Like I need to see that. Period. Because I think he can, and he's shown ability. He's so good. Like he's so good in ways that it's hard to describe to people. But like, I mean, how many guys one-on-one can guard Giannis like he can?
Not very many.
He's like, or Jokic, like one of the few guys I've ever seen give Jokic real problems. As a defender.
The only guy he can't guard is Jonas Valanciunas for some reason. He just absolutely
cannot guard. He cannot guard Jonas, and he can't guard. Oh my goodness, Vucevic.
Yeah.
Like he struggles against them for some reason. Jokic, even though he should be the same breed, like he can handle Jokic, but like those other two, like whatever reason, those two give him the problems, and that's where it's like
they do.
The Hawks always every time they see that, like, oh, we can't trust this. But I'm like, every guy has somebody they struggle against. Like
and that's Capela has his guys too. We agree in general. I mean, again, I'm. It's so weird because I've long been, me and Glenn, I think, have been leading the charge on how good Capela is. And I think both Glenn and I have independently been like, it's probably time, man. Like, and it's crazy for people like me and Glenn to say it's time to trade Clint. But I think that's where I kind of am.
And to be fair to the Hawks, like I think they know this and they're just looking to get the best package.
I think they know, and also, and we can move on too, but I think that there's also this competing faction, which we talked about earlier, and we'll talk about more in a second, of we want to be the best we can be right now. And that's been kind of this theme from Tony Ressler the last couple of years in a lot of ways, which is also interesting because of the tax stuff and the tax avoidance. But like, I think they know that they think their best path to being the best they can be right now is to have both of them, because then they can say we have both of them. Versus like future facing, I think it would be probably move on from Clint and see what you have in Onyeka, but then you're a little bit short at center, and like it's the same kind of thing that talking about with Collins. That's one of the reasons why they never traded Collins, what they probably should have, is that there was some voice somewhere in the back that says, hey, but we don't have a replacement for him, so we're going to get worse if we trade him. And at some point you got to bite the bullet, but that's been a theme the last couple of years with this Hawks team, is that somebody somewhere is like, but we don't want to get worse, and that holds them back from whatever transaction.
To me, this is my biggest takeaway, and we can move on. Like we've seen what the team is with Capela. Like for as great as he is, and I think he's legitimately one of the best centers in the NBA. I think saying even he's a top 15 center is too low for what he provides to teams. Like, I think it's stupid that, like, to me, I think it's dumb that the Mavericks are playing games and like not trying to just put their best package forth for Clint Capela. Like, they could become instant contenders in the Western Conference with Capela right now, compared to like their mismatched units of centers that aren't good enough at the highest level. Like that, they're still not good enough, and they will never be good enough until they get somebody like Clint Capela to really anchor their defense and grab the rebounds that their centers aren't athletic enough to get. Like to me. So with all that aside with Capela, like we seen what the Hawks can be. Like they tap out at 23 best defense in the NBA. And he's a defensive first center. Respect to him. It's time to move on. Let's see how high we can go with Okongwu. Can Okongwu give us a different element? He's a different. We talked about this. He plays differently. He's a different type of defender. He's somebody who gives you more optionality. Like to me, he's a better chess piece. And like Quinn, I feel like Quinn. If I'm Quinn, I'm like, I want to see what I can do with Okongwu on both ends of the floor, even on offense too. Like I want to see all the things he can do. Like I want to see that, and I want to see how high the floor is definitely lower with Okongwu starting, playing 30+ minutes a night, but the ceiling might be higher. So how about we take a risk instead of going with the same old? Because Capela, for all his gifts on this Hawks team, like we're capped out at a certain level because the shooting will just never be there with Clint. Like the shooting just won't be there. It's just too hard to put lineups together and like to get the offense defense mix because of Capela's like a shooting, whereas with Okongwu, you can play him next to Jalen. You can play him next to Bay. He makes both work. Like that's just something Capela has not shown to be able to do. And like like to me, they've got to take a risk if they want to elevate their status in the Eastern Conference. To me, that path is Okongwu, one of the guys who I think has more upside than what he's even shown offensively. But if he doesn't get the opportunity, we'll never see it.
All right, that is all for part 2, and I recommend listening to part 3 and part 1, which should be available in your podcast feeds right now. So please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And again, part 3 should be there. If not already, it will be there very, very soon. Please follow the show on all kinds of social media platforms. Email the show if you want to at lockedonhawks@gmail.com. Thank you for listening so much, everybody. I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you all next time.